Did you know that Carthage is able to take Britannia in the first turn? Did you know that the Iberian Peninsula can be opened up for the Barbarians within the mid-game? And did you know that Rome is able to assert influence over the Atlantic, even from the early game? Find out all this and more as we take a look at a strategy guide for Rome Total War, the board game. Hi everyone, are you bored through? We're bored through, and here at Bored Through we're all about the gameplay. And today what we're doing is we're taking a look at a strategy guide for Rome Total War, the board game. In particular, the strategy that we're looking at today is called the ladder, and what it is a way of being able to change up the way that you play compared to the traditional way that this game is played, which is often done using the Scythe method. You'll understand what I mean when we get into it. I want to be able to try and shake that up a little bit and offer people ways of being able to look at the board that you may have never seen before. So today we're going to take a look at the ladder, but before we get to that, let's take a look at what the traditional game would often look like. What would often happen is that you would find that Carthage would advance north up in the Iberian Peninsula to up at these regions here, whilst at the same time the barbarians will be advancing south into here. And what that does is it ends up creating battle lines round about the Pyrenees, somewhere north, somewhere slightly south of that sometimes, depending on the luck that they get in terms of the advance that they're making. But the game tends to kind of just get stuck there as you find an army is then trapped, having to stand here, whilst the barbarian army at the same time is also standing there. So they're able to come in to take these regions, but then what happens is everything then just gets stuck, and that's what I call the Scythe method. Scythe referring to the board game Scythe, where this sort of thing very much happens. You have armies that will plod along, they'll come and they'll meet with each other, and then they'll just stand and stare at each other because they're both afraid of attacking. That's what can happen here in Rome Total War, the board game as well. We want to be able to avoid this scenario, and a way that you're going to be able to avoid this scenario is by following the strategy that I'm calling the ladder. So let's take a look at what this ladder actually looks like, and we're going to do that in just a moment here. So the first thing that we want to do when we're taking a look at the ladder is we want to notice that the sea regions that exist along the western part of the board are meeting up with quite a few of the land regions, and every single place that the land region meets the sea region, that functions as one of our rungs of the ladder. Because what you're able to do is that as you're able to move armies into these land regions, you can board a ship and move them up, and the fleets are actually able to move much faster than the armies can, offering you a way of not only being able to move much faster, but be able to get round the enemy very quickly as well. So as you can see, each of these rungs represented by where a land region is touching a sea region, that is the ladder that I'm referring to. So let's see how each of these factions are able to take advantage of the ladder. And in particular, we're going to start with the Carthaginians. What the Carthaginians are able to do is they're able to raise one of their armies down here, and then they're able to raise one of their fleets. This is going to work much better if Carthage is going first, but it's not absolutely essential. What's going to happen here then is Carthage is then going to board their army onto the fleet. That's going to cost one movement. The fleet's then going to move up here for a second movement, and then it's going to move up here for a third movement. And this is where people don't realise, but actually these sea regions touch underneath the victory point board. Because the victory point board is there, people think that that means it's out of bounds. It actually isn't. There's nothing in the rules that says that it's out of bounds. And what is shown is the sea sitting all around it. And what we know, because we don't just want to be correct technically within the rules of the game, but also in the spirit of the game, this is open sea. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being able to go into this region here. So this is what the sea regions actually look like underneath the victory point board there. So what that means is that Carthage has actually moved 1, 2, 3, which means they've got 1 point left, that if they do actually move their navy up here, they can then put this army, which has boarded the fleet, they can then actually land that army um, onto Britannia straight away. And so you've got two options in doing that. You can go up here, or you can go into here. It really doesn't matter which of these two that you go into initially, as long as you go into one, and then what I would recommend is you then take the other one. I recommend doing that instead of moving up here into Londinium. And the reason why I recommend that is because if you actually take your army and your army then goes into Londinium, and it ends up getting stuck there because as the barbarians instead want to come and defend this region here, that's when you're going to end up in another situation where you're just opening up yet another line where you're not free, you're not mobile. Yes, you denied the barbarians from Britannia, and maybe that is enough in the first time you try this strategy, but you really don't want to get stuck in this situation. If you do have a forced march card, which is, I don't know what the likelihood of that is, but if you did manage to get that, that would give you the opportunity to take all of these regions here, and you'll be able to hold on to Britannia. Of course, the barbarians are not actually able to respond to this in their first turn, but what I'd recommend is that if you don't have the forced march card, actually just leave Londinium so we can avoid this scenario that's going on up here. And instead, what I'd say what you want to do is that you want to capture these regions up here. So let me just represent that by putting the markers down for us. So you want to capture these two regions, and as you capture these two regions, you're then also thinking about laying down a barracks. That's going to be important for the late game, so keep that in mind. And you'll want to lay down some walls as well. And what that does is it's going to very much disincentivize the barbarian player from coming in and taking them in the late game. So allow the barbarian player to come into Londinium, allow them to go ahead and put their marker down in there. That's absolutely fine. If they want to try and attack these regions, then they're going to do so against very, very heavy odds. But what I'd recommend is that as you've done that there, then what you want to do is you want to take your army and board your fleet again. Pardon me, wrong colour. You want to board your fleet again, and as you board your fleet again, you're then moving your fleet down, and you've got quite a few options here. And the first option is that you could just be quite boring, bring it down here, get it back onto the Iberian Peninsula, and do what Carthage is really good, taking advantage of that Iberian Peninsula. That's what I would refer to as the Citadel. That's going to be a strategy that we'll look at much later. But if you don't want to do that, you can also move it down. You can also move it down into this sea region here, whereby you're then able to come in and actually, whilst the barbarians are still panicking and trying to figure out what is going to happen with Britannia, you can come into here and actually assert control a little bit north of what would be the traditional line. And so instead of you getting stuck here, maybe you can actually take them on there. Maybe you could take these regions here, so you're actually forming lines much further up. The last thing that you can do if you want to be really bold is you can move into this region here, and from here you can then attack the barbarians in the north of the map, even attacking one of the most northerly points in the whole game. But that's completely dependent on what the barbarians are doing at this stage. What's very likely is that if the barbarians are following a much more traditional pattern, they've moved an army down here, they've come into the Alps to take on the Romans, and they're moving across the board over here so that they can take on the Greeks over there. If you were to put an army into here, that's going to get one of the reserve armies out, but it's whether you want to take that on in the early game. I think that what you want to do is you'd want to make one of your small armies, take one of your small armies and put them up into there. And the advantage of doing that then is that you're able to keep it mobile and keep it fresh. So that's the way that Carthage is actually able to take advantage of the natural geography of these regions that sit by the sea. Now what I'm going to do is show you what it is the barbarians that can do. This is not as good for the barbarians, but there is still a lot they can do. They're not able to take advantage of this in the first turn because they need to develop their fleets. But if they can see that Carthage is actually taking on a much more traditional role, it's come and it's trying to take over the Iberian Peninsula, they're trying to assert control there, they're trying to keep you out, that's fine. You, as the barbarians, you can send one of your armies down then, form that line there as you normally would, as they expect you to. But then what you're able to do is you're able to get one of your fleets out into here, and you can do that from turn number 2 potentially. So you can get one of your fleets out into here, and then immediately, if you've got an army that's sitting in either one of these regions here, you can move that army out into here onto the fleet, and then you've got the opportunity to attack down into Iberia. If you can see that the Carthaginian player is actually sitting to the north of there, then move the army out, move it off into this region, and then bang, bang, bang. There's 3 places that you're able to attack that if it's nice and open, you can do that. And if you want to be really, really cheeky, you can move one of your armies out onto your fleet. Fleet goes here, and now you actually have the opportunity to attack the Carthaginians in the back there, actually managing to take one of their regions, especially if they've sent an army up north. But if you didn't want to do that, you've also got the opportunity that you can actually go right down here into the south, and you can actually start moving across the desert there. Kind of risky. The Carthaginians are certainly not going to like that, but it's a way that you're able to assert control over those parts of the boards, even quite early on in the game, so that by turn 2 and 3, this is what things could look like. You could actually assert a lot of pressure on the Carthaginians, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be enemies with the Carthaginians. This could be a great way of bringing them to the negotiating table and getting them to actually take you seriously, because the barbarians very much, if they're going to win the game, they're going to do it based on how they're reacting in the early part of the game. The Romans are actually also able to take advantage of this. If Rome is actually able to board one of its fleets over by Rome in the first turn, it's then able to move the fleet into here with an army, and from here, so you'll have one army that's used 1 movement point to get into here, and then it's going to use a 2nd movement point to come here, and its 3rd movement point to come into here. And what it can do is it can actually then create a nice little defensible pocket here. What they can then do is they can move that fleet around, so it's already used 1 point of movement. It's 1 point of movement to embark, 1 point of movement to move, 1 point of movement to disembark. So that's all you're going to be able to do in the first turn. But in the second turn, you can then go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then suddenly you've got that fleet there ready and available, so that Rome is actually able to do the exact same thing. So this is really, really important, that if the barbarians have actually been very slow in moving their forces down here to the south, and so that their line is kind of sitting here. Meanwhile, the Carthaginians have gone for their traditional method. They're just interested in taking advantage of the natural protection offered by these mountains. That's where Rome actually has the opportunity to come into this bubble and take advantage of it. The Greeks, on the other hand, they're very unlikely to be able to take advantage of this method. However, what you do find is that they do have some way of being able to come over here, so they can actually load a fleet in their first turn, and then I'm going to count it. You can't. It's off screen, but they can go 1, and then 2 into this region here, and then 3 up into here. So they'll have used up all of their movement points, because you need 1 to embark. But you could actually have a Greek fleet in the first turn sitting over here, loaded with an army, with the opportunity that it can actually come in and launch attacks. And they can launch attacks into here, they can launch attacks into here, and they could launch attacks into here. So wherever is sitting open and is looking good, the Greeks are able to assert control over the western part of the board, but it much more limited and not able to take advantage of that ladder in that first turn. But they can do exactly what the Romans did in the second turn if they can see that opening there. It's a little bit risky. Do you really want to have a fleet all the way over there? Do you want an army stuck all the way over there? Because in order to replenish that army, it needs to have access to the supply route, which means that if you went at war with Rome, and Rome is probably going to be sitting fleets over here in the center of the board, somewhere where I call the Triangle of Death. That's another strategy that we'll look at later. That's going to make it very, very difficult for the Greeks. So it's probably a very high risk strategy for the Greeks, certainly not one that I would recommend. But it is possible for them to come and take advantage of this as well. So thanks for tuning in and listening to my view as to how we can actually open up the western part of the board. Today what we did is we covered the ladder, how it's actually really great for the Carthaginians to put pressure on the barbarians. The barbarians could take advantage of Carthage if they're sitting with a very sleepy setup. The Romans are able to take advantage of this if they desired to have influence over the western part of the board. But apart from that, what we'll be doing next time is taking a look at the next strategy, which is called the Moon, and in particular that is going to be looking very heavily at Britannia and how it is that Britannia can be used to assert influence over the continent. But in order to get there, first of all, it would be great if you guys could like this video and subscribe so that you're able to get more of them. Also, what you can do is you can share this video with your frenemies so that they are able to take advantage of this as well. But maybe you want to keep this a secret in the first instance. So I'm going to go for it now, guys, and catch you in the next video.